What's up, everybody? Welcome back to BoldTV. I'm your host, Philip Michael, and let's get right into it. Now, Facebook is working on a new device that can actually read our brains. So they're developing this neural sensor that can turn thoughts into actions. Imagine that. Now, it could be used for typing, virtual reality, and video games. But given Facebook's somewhat shaky reputation when it comes to these things, many people are skeptical about the company having this technology. Now, of course, Facebook tracks a lot of what we do. They have a lot of the information about us, and this is how they make their money. And I think we all know the feeling when we talk about something and all of a sudden it pops up on our phone. Something we mention, an ad comes up, right? So understandably, some people may be on the fence about how this device that now can read your mind and what they would do with it. But it is an interesting technology from an innovation standpoint. So be interesting to see what happens next. Now, speaking of Facebook, the social media company is accusing Apple of anti-competitive practices. I had to just chuckle there. It seems a lot like the pot calling the kettle black. Apple is now giving users the choice to opt out of tracking features that allow apps to dole out targeted ads. Now, Facebook is mad because they're resistant to this change because most of their revenue comes from our data and ads. And Facebook is also siding with smaller app developers against Apple's App Store fees, which takes a bite out of the revenue for smaller creators. Of course, we can't ignore Facebook being sued for antitrust and anti-competitive practices themselves. Now, this is just ironic on so many levels, but it is also symptomatic of a lot of things that happens when you're doing business at that level. Just look at Apple and Samsung fighting each other over technology, patents, market share, things of that nature. When you get to that level, these are just some of the things that happens. It happens in every single industry, whether it's in sports, whether it's in, of course, in tech, anywhere. So it's just something that you'll see, again, when business is done at that level. However, it is quite ironic to see Facebook complain about anti-competitive practices. Meanwhile, they own WhatsApp, Instagram, and effectively, our entire mobile life. Just, there's a bit of irony there. Anyways, lastly, an Irish couple built homes for their employees to make it easier for them to stick around. Patricia and Tony Walsh own two companies and employ 120 people, but they're in an expensive location with limited housing options. So what did these entrepreneurs do? They found a solution. So they built 70 units, 20 of which they will sell to their employees for 30,000 euros below the market price. The other 50, they'll just sell for full price to other buyers, make some money along the way. Now, they do have an informal agreement with their employees that in exchange for their new home ownership, the workers will stay with the company for at least 10 years. Now, personally, as an entrepreneur, I find this to be a very innovative and forward-thinking move. And it's one of those things where, again, whenever there are market conditions or anything that happens, it's up to you to adjust to the defense, so to speak. It's up to you to figure out how to deal with the realities that exist out there. So this here is just a beautiful way of taking what companies would do before, which is give MBAs to their employees. They'll pay for their MBAs and in exchange for them staying for a few years. Now, you can keep people for 10 years in their home, make them become attached to this home, and you will reduce turnover. If the thing works, right? If the thing works. Let's see. It could be interesting, but it is an interesting move and it's very innovative. So good in these entrepreneurs in a way and trying to figure out a way to recruit and keep people and keep talent in an era where people are jumping from opportunity to opportunity. It's just what it is. So well done on them. Moving on, let's talk about New Year's resolutions. Obviously, 2020 is coming to a close and 2021 is right around the corner. So we got to talk about those resolutions. And to help us do just that, Jeff Brandeis is going to tell us how to make a list and to stick to it. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me here.
I'm happy to have you. Now let's get to it. How can we all be more productive and manage our time better in the new year?
Well, managing time is obviously one thing that we all have only a limited amount of. We all have the same amount of time. So one, list your goals, list your priorities. I always like to have people create what their long-term goals are and even what their short-term goals are. Short-term being 6 months or less, and long-term being greater than 6 months and even up to 2 or 3 years.
Now, whenever we just turn the corner on all the Christmas eating and getting with the family, and we say, you know what, we start the year fresh. This year is my year. I'm going to do A, B, C, X, Y, C, and then they stop. Why is that? Why does that happen? Why do people do that?
Well, it's because you're not holding yourself accountable.
Mm-hmm.
You really actually, at the end of the day, most people make their resolutions in their mind.
Mm.
But if you actually write it down, you create the plan, and you begin to organize your priorities, then you will have a more likelihood of sticking with it. And if you get in the habit of looking at your priorities every morning, you set your ABC list, you focus on your A's, and you knock those out. And one by one, you begin to get into managing your time a whole lot better.
You say
More
ABC. What do you mean by that? You mean a
I'm sorry.
sequential list, or is that a concept
ABC.
of yours?
So ABCs, your biggest priorities, the major must get done. The B's that could be, I'm okay if those hold off another day or so.
Uh-huh.
And the C's, I mean, they're more nuisances. Yeah, I know I need to get to them, but at the end of the day, it's all about those A's. Those are the hot buttons. Those are the ones that must get done. And sometimes you have some big lists of A's, so you really got to look at them and kind of like Swiss cheese, knock holes in them one by one.
One by one. Now, you talked about setting goals and accountability, what comes with that. But the absence of accountability is what can lead to procrastination. Can we eliminate that going into the new year?
Now, that's part of it's a mindset, and part of it's holding yourself accountable, and conceivably, part of it is having someone coach you and making you hold yourself accountable to doing what you need to do on a daily basis. And I know some of us have managers, and those lists get to be pretty long. So talk to your manager, find out what the priorities are for them, which then become the priority for you as well. So have those conversations. It's good for both parties.
Good for both parties. Now, what are you looking forward to in the new year?
I'm looking
Overall.
forward to growth,
Uh-huh.
scaling, happiness, getting over our way of living right now, to be
Uh-huh.
candid with you. So we all can get back into somewhat more of a normal life. Hopefully, the vaccine obviously begins to take effect and we get back to more face-to-face, more eating out, and businesses begin to get back to normal.
Now, what is one final thing you'd like to leave our viewers with, whether it's whether it's a tidbit of advice, whether it's a tool, a tactic, something that they can employ in their lives that can increase their productivity or reduce their procrastination, whatever it is, what do you have for us?
Make that list every morning or the night before you go to sleep, so that when you wake up in the morning, you know what you need to focus in on, or before you start your day and while you're having your coffee, make that list so you can make those A's. Put the C's in the drawer, put them below, and make one piece of paper. Don't have 20 sheets or sticky notes all over your desk. So you're focused, you know what you need to accomplish, and you will keep to your New Year's resolution, which is making the most of your time and setting your priorities the right way.
Love that. Thank you so much for being here today, Jeff.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Philip.
You got it, brother. Now, can you make more money as a freelancer? Freelancing, aka the gig economy, has caught a lot of attention in the job industry over the last few years. Now, instead of committing to the 9-to-5 office life or picking up a blue-collar job, workers have been opting to work several smaller jobs on temporary or long-term contracts. Now, many people thought that if they left their office job to, do freelance, that they will make less money. However, a recent survey by Bunny Studio found that 63% of freelancers make more money than if they had a 9-to-5 job. Very interesting. Now, the most attractive thing about freelance work is that you may end up working fewer hours per day. Freelancers claim that they have a healthier work-life balance, which allows them to dedicate more time to pursue what they find meaningful. They also highlight their flexible schedules and ability to work remotely, which is pretty nice. Working remotely has its benefits because it's very cost-effective. You save both time and money when you don't have to, commute. You can wake up and get right to work without having to pay for gas, a bus, or a train ticket. It's pretty neat because, you keep your expenses down. Now, with its advantages, freelancing also has a few disadvantages. It's always a trade-off. Without a strict 9-to-5 schedule, oftentimes you may have to work later than you would like because you're more on a deadline schedule versus on the clock. Also, many freelance contracts do not come with benefits, so you will have to go out of pocket for things like health or life insurance. So, again, it goes back to the basic premise of life. If you do one thing that has advantages, there's always a trade-off. If there's something that has disadvantages, there's a trade-off. This is how it works. What you're giving up in perks, you gain that in flexibility. So if that's your thing, then it might be worth the trade-off. But if you care more about the perks and the security, then the freelance lifestyle may not be for you. So there's no black, white way to look at it. It's just a matter of what works for you. Next, let's talk about investing with the founder of Shaping Wealth. Welcome, Brian Portnoy.
Hi, good to see you.
Good to see you too, my friend. Now let's get right to it. At what age do you think someone should start getting into investing in wealth building?
Well, they should start learning about financial concepts and money at a relatively young age, whether that's 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. There's a lot of research now in the world of financial literacy that shows that people can get started relatively early to understand the main concepts of saving and spending and borrowing.
Right.
And if they do that, they're teed up.
Right. And one of the things that we really don't learn in school growing up, especially at that age, are those concepts that you mentioned. Why is that? And do you think the school should adopt this more into the curricula?
100% should adopt it more. The reason they don't is that money is the most uncomfortable topic. It's just something we don't talk about. We talk about politics and religion and family stuff, but money's uncomfortable. We as a society need to move beyond that and understand that the basic building blocks of a successful money life are there for just about anybody to have.
Right. That's one of the things I always say. I have an Instagram page where I talk about some of these similar topics, and I like to say wealth is a function of 7th grade math and a set of rules. You just have to understand what those rules are. Now, and that takes me to my next question. What do you think about apps like Robinhood and Acorns for first-time investors that are just learning? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, the devil's in the details. I mean, with Acorns and other apps that allow you to make small investments and not get a little bit over your skis, that's fine. Other apps like Robinhood, where you can trade for free and chase hot trends, I would be careful when it comes to chasing hot trends through investment apps, because you can end up losing a lot of money quickly. It's felt easy lately. It's not normally this easy.
Right, because there are no fees, and it's young people, and they get into almost the gambling type of routine, and it's almost gamified on there. So it brings people in, but also that flip side of what you mentioned. Now, what could young wealth builders learn from your new book?
So yeah, we published a book called How I Invest My Own Money a few weeks ago. 25 contributors, financial experts talking about how they invest, save, spend, borrow. The first thing is, money is a personal experience. The phrase personal finance? Money's more personal than it is finance. It starts with figuring out what's important to you and then building a plan to get there. And that money is an expression of your values. And so, yes, 7th grade math, you need to understand the basics of addition, subtraction, how amounts compound over time. But we also need to take very seriously the emotional and psychological component. And the book gets into that in some detail.
What is one main, you talk psychological and emotional components, what is one major one as it relates to money, and that may resonate with people as they hear that, but may not be aware of?
We're all wired for the cycle of greed and fear. Okay. When the market goes up, we get excited. Like lately, it's been, like I said, it's felt easy. Other times, like March, when the market was down 50%, we get scared.
Right.
And as a result, we tend to buy high and sell low, which is actually the opposite of what we're supposed to do. So we need to check ourselves. You kind of need to know what emotional state in, because if you're finding investing exciting, you're probably doing it wrong.
That's an excellent soundbite. Now, do you have any predictions or expectations for 2021 as the year comes to a close?
No, so I don't make market predictions, and I think we should be careful about those who do, because they tend to be wrong more often than they're right. I think people, especially younger people, should be goals oriented. Buying a car, saving for college, getting that nicer home, taking a nicer vacation or whatever. Align your finances to what's important to you, not what some market guru tells you is going to happen in 2021.
So basically tie it into a personal goal. And what age do you think is the best? We touched on this briefly, but what is the best age if you're Is it ever too late? Is it ever too early? What would be the ideal age to start investing?
Right. Well, so, I think we can begin to share with siblings, children at a younger age, some of the core concepts. But, as we go out there, like you and I did as young men, you get a job, you're working minimum wage, you begin to save. When you're 15, 16, 17, that is a perfect age to start thinking about saving, responsibly, maybe putting away, 10% of your paycheck here and there, and that will compound over time. Not taking on too much debt. That can be, really harmful.
Mm-hmm.
Credit cards, taking on too much college debt. So never too early.
Never too early. Excellent stuff. Thank you so much for being here, Brian.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
All right, thank you. Next, the year 2020 is coming to a close. Now, let's wrap up the year by talking about some of the entrepreneurs to watch out for in 2021. Now, the first one on my list is Brian Chesky, who's the CEO of Airbnb. Of course, when everything hit and travel shut down, leisure shut down, of course, Airbnb struggled. They were right in the middle of branching out into other markets, not just actual locations. I'm talking about other revenue streams for them. Then suddenly everything else shut down that was related to travel, and they hurt. The CEO, of course, had to go out and make some tough decisions to just keep everything afloat. He had to take $1 billion in debt. Fast forward to December. You all heard about this. Airbnb goes public. They were targeting a $30 to $40 billion valuation, and they end up at 100 billion plus. Now, with that initial burst from the public offering, what happens in 2021? It'll be exciting to see, because will travel come back? That's question number one. Can they keep up the momentum? Will the demand be so pent up that people would just travel like crazy because they now can work remotely because it's been integrated into the daily routine? Is all things to look out for, and how Brian Chesky will capitalize on these trends and what happens in the next year will be very interesting to look out for. I know for one, I will. Now, the second entrepreneur is Jay-Z, Sean Carter, who, just became the chief visionary officer of a cannabis SPAC. Now, if you haven't heard of SPACs, it's essentially a way to list a company, go public with a company that then goes out and buys a company that's private, and that way becomes a publicly traded company. Now, JC has a rich, no pun intended, history in business, starting out as a successful musician, then a record label executive, getting into real estate, art collection, basketball, everything. It seems like whatever Jigga touches turns to gold. But cannabis, I don't know. It's a growing industry for sure. And JC obviously is an idol and a conduit to youth culture and pop culture. Let's see what he can do. There's still, with cannabis, there's a lot of question marks in terms of regulatory things that we cannot see. Will it all be legalized all over the country? And one thing that JC didn't necessarily turn to gold was when he jumped into boxing. And it's sort of been swept under the rug, but he came into boxing a few years ago, and there were a few scandals, a few fighters he signed lost him a lot of money. He said, you know what, I'm out of here. But every entrepreneur will have to take risk, and you will have to fail sometimes to improve your processes and do better. Is cannabis the place where he would do better? Is that where it's at for the billionaire music mogul? Time will tell. That's why we'll have to look out for him in 2021. Now, the last one on my list of three is WeWork CEO Sandeep Mathrani. Now, this is really interesting. WeWork was already in dire straits as it was in a perfect world. Then everything shut down and people cut their leases. Now, with WeWork, you take month-to-month leases, people cut it. So in a perfect world, they were already struggling because of their failed IPO and so on and so forth. Now, with work practically shutting down, a lot of co-working companies have been struggling. A lot of local ones have shut down. Notel, one of the larger competitors to WeWork, is facing 21 lawsuits in New York over $10 million in unpaid rent. They're facing evictions. There's just a lot of uncertainty around this whole sub-sector, if you will. But now still, the industry is still bullish on the sector as it is. The whole co-working community element, the industry is bullish on it. But what I will be looking for the CEO of WeWork is, how can he take something that was already struggling and doubling down on the core service before WeWork was branching out into residential living, education, creating a universe. Now he wants to get to work with WeWork and just double down on just that, the work. And one thing to look out for with Sandeep is he used to be the CEO of a publicly traded real estate investment trust. So a real estate company. That was his gig before. So he knows how to run a company of that size. But he's a real estate guy only. It's not about all the extra stuff that we're trying to do. So that will be exciting to look out for. Can he dig deep with his team and WeWork his way out of, this rut? Or will it turn out what many people thought in the beginning, that the most hyped startup in the world would remain just that? Hype. But those are the three to look out for. So watch out for what they do in 2021. Jay-Z, Sandeep from WeWork, and Brian Chesky from Airbnb. Now, it's time for this week's edition of Ask Philip. We narrowed it down to 3 questions, and here we go. Our first question comes from Joe Flippin on Twitter. Hey, Philip, what are some business red flags I should look out for? Hashtag Ask Philip, Philip being me. All right, let's get into it. It's a very broad question that you're asking me, because what red flags? It could be if you're trying to start a lemonade stand and you're trying to buy some lemons and the guy is standing there with some oranges. That's a red flag. He's like, I got lemons, but it's really oranges. Or, another analogy that applies to similar to what I just said. The whole key thing is to trust your gut and just employ common sense. In terms of red flags, it could be anything. If someone, you know how the basic scams go. If someone wants to do something but they don't want to be upfront, be transparent, those are red flags. Those are always red flags. It always boils down to common sense. Is someone upfront? Is someone on the up and up? Are they trying to hide something? Or are they not willing to get into an agreement with you? Are they concealing stuff? All those things, it basically comes down to the same thing that you would look at if you're trying to establish a friendship with someone, or if you just feel off, there may be something off. But again, the actual question was quite broad. You have to get more specific with the situation. So if you hit me back next week about a specific scenario, I can give you a better answer. But overall, common sense and trust your gut. That's what I would say with what I'm presenting. Now, number 2, our next question is from Blair on Twitter. My good friend Philip, what are the key differences in making business decisions in Denmark and the United States? Oh my God. That's really a tough question, because it's really cultural. Whenever you have international business, like doing business in different cultures, you have to be very cognizant, aware, and sensitive also to the cultural nuances that exist. For instance, in Denmark, people are very much, they're not cutthroat per se, so it's very friendly, and that surprised me a little bit, because I did a real estate deal with two top operators over there, 2 of the largest private equity firms. And I thought to myself, because in America it's more of a capitalist society, that on that level it can be very cutthroat, and to some degree you may have to be an a-hole. That was really surprising to me, that people are very, very nice and friendly. Now, granted, in the contracts is where you stand your ground and you ask for stuff and things of that nature. But it's just, people are very much friendlier there. People are more warmer, and is more inclusive in a sense. But it's just different. At the end of the day, you just want to make sure that you're, one thing that permeates or even transcends any cultural restrictions is, if you say you're going to do something, do it. Your word being important, being upfront and honest. And again, let me repeat this. If you say you're going to do something, do it. So that's what I would say. Other than that, doing business in Denmark and the U.S., I really have to think about that, because there's a lot of nuance to that particular question. But thank you for that, though. I hope what I said did make some sense. All about keeping your word and doing what's right. Now, our last question comes from Tommy on Twitter. What does Tommy say? Tommy says, hey, Philip, is it smart to start a real estate business during this time? Again, one of those questions that have different elements to it. Now, are you trying to start a brokerage? Are you trying to start as a real estate salesperson? Because it can be a really good business in certain markets. Maybe not so much in the larger markets like New York City, LA, San Francisco, because there's a large degree of, they call it metro flight at the moment. People pay top dollar to live inside the real estate in the big cities, but they don't live there for the actual brick and mortar. They don't pay the big bucks for the actual brick and mortar. You pay for everything that surrounds the brick and mortar. Arts, culture, restaurants, nightlife, networking. all that good stuff. And if those things don't exist, then your purchase decision gets narrowed down to just the brick and mortar. And then you look at it, wait a minute, I'm paying this much for 1,000 square feet, 500 square feet. For this much, I can get 2,500 square feet in an area where things are working, maybe if not normally, but a lot closer to normal than we see in the big, in the big condensed cities. So that's one of the things I would say. It all depends on where you want to go and what you want to do. It could also be a situation where, all right, some of these markets that people are flocking to, it could be that you want to start a real estate acquisition business and become a landlord on a small scale, buy some property there and rent it out to people who may not want to live in those markets permanently, but who are just coming right now while they're escaping the big metros. So there's a lot of ways. In short, yes, it can be a good idea. I think it is an excellent idea. We're doing a lot of real estate business. Obviously, right now, we're picking up more properties than ever before. So I personally think it's good, but you just have to make sure that you jump into it where the opportunity sits and not where it does not. Make sense? All right. If you want to hear your question live, make sure to follow us on social media. Ask us a question on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Parler at BoldTV, and we will feature you on next week's show. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for a great 2020, and make sure you follow and subscribe to BoldTV on YouTube, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, and TikTok. Till next time, see you next time, and see you next year.